Welcome back as we send you home today. It is a delight to have George Khalaf with us here in the InvestYRefi.com studios. George is many things in town. He is a political consultant and pollster through the Resolute Group and Data Orbital. He is also a candidate for Arizona State House of Representatives in Legislative District 3. GeorgeKhalaf.com is his website. And he spells his last name Khalaf. George, good to see you, buddy.
Always good to be with you, Seth.
You're working hard on the campaign trail. I see you have a coffee coming up, though.
Yes, in
Coffee with Khalaf.
In Cave Creek.
Yeah, I wish I could go. I would go, but it
conflicts. Of course. Yeah, it's in the middle of the day. It's not. We still need to do more of an afternoon or evening thing in Cave Creek. Yes, I am on the campaign trail very consistently, but also multiple things. I mean, I'm working on my campaign, which is going very well, working on, a campaign to push back against some of the anti-ESA stuff. That's why you're very gracious to have our usual time is Friday. We're meeting today because I'll be actually in Tucson tomorrow talking about that with our Arizona Federation of Republican Women. But lots of good things happening, lots to do.
Tell me about the ESA situation. You gave us an update last week kind of to disabuse some concerns that mainstream reporting was doing on it.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're just every day there continues to be a new thing. Opponents of these programs truly are serving up items, so almost for a game of whack-a-mole to distract. The big existential threat, as folks know and I spoke about, is the potential ballot measure, which a lot of folks are rallying to create a decline to sign effort, meaning that if you see any ballot measure out on the street asking you to sign for something to do with the Empowerment Scholarship account, you just don't sign. But the big thing, Seth, that we need to be cognizant of is that there's one, as I mentioned last week, one particular reporter in the media who is diametrically opposed to this program and just continues to find every possible way to paint the program in the most negative light. And we have spent a significant amount of time pushing back against falsities that he has put forward. He's thinking and he's saying that he's holding our feet to the fire. Well, someone has to hold his. And so far he's been able to speak about this unchecked.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you. I ask you, and maybe it doesn't change a lot, but when you're out doing campaign events, issues people are most concerned about, are they moving into the economic? Are they still kind of the safe communities and immigration stuff?
It is a lot of economic. I am hearing more about the fraud, right? So the stories about the fraud, that stemmed from then first Minneapolis to now, we have cases in Arizona and different things. So people are taking that very seriously. There's a lot of talk about the election, just in general, right? But not my election per se in November, in July in the primary, but the election in November, the general election, the direction of the state. I think in general there's a clear awareness that where we are headed right now is not good. Katie Hobbs has taken us down the wrong path, and so there is a lot of talk among Republicans, even if they're not like every day focused on politics, concerned to say, okay, can we win in November? Tied to, of course, the economic issues.
Talk to me about turnout and how important that is. I was speaking with someone the other day. I don't quite recall who. Was talking about enthusiasm and turnout and how that's going to be a huge factor for Republicans in this midterms.
Look, a lot of focus this coming week is going to be on Texas because their primary is on March 3rd, right. Tuesday. Uh-huh. A takeaway that we have seen so far, but it's a partial takeaway because in-person early voting has not started in Texas, so just let's keep that in mind. So far, Democrats are at north of 200% of their same last election. So 4 years ago at this time, they're 200%, meaning they are double the turnout. Republicans, we are 135%. Mm-hmm. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
There was another survey, national survey, that showed that we, Republicans, we are slightly less enthusiastic to vote in November than Democrats. Those two things worry me. Now, again, partial picture. Again, I never take one data point like that as a data guy and say, okay, we're going to paint a broad brushstroke and this spells doom for Arizona. But I am sounding the alarms because part of the way that we solve for this is we sound the alarms, and I'm doing it like literally every single day and every opportunity that I can, even in non-political settings, to talk about it. If you're frustrated with what's happening, you have to vote. Being registered is not enough, and complaining is not enough, obviously.
Okay. Typically, when we think about what people are going to vote on, and a lot of these things tend to be local when it comes to Senate races, when it comes to congressional races, all of Congress is up, of course. People talk about generally their economic condition. The economics matters. And I understand that. And is that going to be the main campaign theme, do you think? Because it seems to me the economy isn't going to be getting much worse between now and November. We'll get to the State of the Union address, because I was thinking that the State of the Union address was interesting in that, if I read it right, Donald Trump spent about 20% on the economy, and the most on quite Machiavellianly smart, pointing out just how weird the Democratic Party is. I don't know if people vote on weird or against weird.
Well, we should unpack that, but I would say from an economic messaging perspective to your question of is this going to be the topic, the vice president today is in a small town in Ohio speaking about that. Why? Because it is critical, or maybe Wisconsin, in the Midwest. It is critical that we win and own this. Why? Because we won in 24 under the understanding that Joe Biden's America was horrific for the middle class and for low income and those in urban environments. That's why President Trump did better than any Republican in a long time, right? And won the popular vote for that reason. But we also understand that you don't just snap a finger and you right size, and then there's pressure because of tariffs, whether you love or hate. It's a dynamic, right? Everybody in the administration has acknowledged that tariffs will have momentary constraints to then have long-term benefit, right? Like that's even the selling point, even from those that support it, let alone if you oppose it. And so there's a lot of work to say, okay, affordability is something that as Republicans we can be proud of. So that 20% that you talked about that the president focused on in the State of the Union, it was to focus on what? Successes in terms of where we've come in the last year. So I do think it's going to be the topic. We see that in Arizona for sure. And again, even for those, and I'm always reminded, in the district, there's a lot of parts of the state that are doing very well. Even if they're not worried about it for themselves, they're worried about it for their children and their grandchildren. And I do hear that. Price of houses consistently discussed. My kids can't buy homes. My grandkids can't buy homes.
The housing thing kind of came up, interestingly, by my lights, I don't know, starting maybe a year ago or so. And what I found interesting about it is a lot of the disaffection about the affordability of housing amongst 20-somethings. And maybe I was deaf and blind to this, but I don't remember that being a big priority when I was a 20-something. I just don't remember. Now, maybe priorities have changed, and maybe culture and history has changed things. But it almost seemed like it was, I mean, we know housing is incredibly expensive, but as something that would disaffect 20-year-olds, I just was curious to me. Maybe 20-year-olds think differently than when I was 20. Could be. I mean, it was a generation ago.
I think this may be the key difference. I think that those that wanted it could get it.
Okay.
Now the feeling is whether I want it or don't want it, whether it is or is not a priority, it is unattainable. You know human nature. Even for those that don't want it, if you feel like you can't have it, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? There's a desirability factor.
Right.
But I think there is a contingency that do want it in their 20s that do not feel, right? There's no such thing as a quote-unquote starter home anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the key difference, if I can highlight a difference.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I'm not sure. I mean, you know, there's this interest in the public of having the politicians or political leaders or elected leaders fix every problem. And the Democrats are very happy to try and adjust every leaky faucet in someone's house. But the truth is there are limited tools. There are limited tools that can be deployed to change the housing scene within the course of a year or two. Am I wrong? I mean, there are a few things that can be done, but they are limited.
Economic trends almost overall, other than sort of real-time cost of like food staples, like eggs and things, those are far more responsive. You are correct.
Okay.
But I think what the desire, my desire is that are we setting the nation on a track where we are making it more achievable in the realistic time frame? The answer before was no. Yeah. The answer, I believe now, is yes, or at least we're getting there. So I think that's the thing. But you are right. Changing those types of macroeconomic trends in a year or two without some supernatural occurrence is very difficult.
And not great for a politician to admit to either. I mean, right, if someone asks you about a problem, they don't want to hear there's very little I can do about that.
Yeah. But we've had a lot of success, which is why the president was right to highlight those. And I think he did a good
temperament,
job.
Mood, and belief in an optimistic and growth-oriented economy, which is what I think is the new thing the president has brought. And let's talk about that vis-a-vis the State of the Union from 2 nights ago. George Khalaf is my guest. GeorgeKhalaf.com. Learn more about him or help him out. Be right back. Welcome back to the Seth Leibsohn Show, coming to you from the InvestYRefi.com studios. George Khalaf is my guest, political consultant, pollster, and candidate for Arizona House of Representatives in Legislative District 3, which is North Scottsdale-ish, up Fountain Hills, Cave Creek, Carefree, really some of the most fun and beautiful places. It's a privilege to live in LD3 if you do. I don't, but
it is beautiful. It is beautiful. All the way up to Anthem and New River. It's a very diverse district as well.
I have the privilege of living in LD4. I'm going to have one of the representatives in studio tomorrow. We're a more divided, slightly more divided district than LD3. I think we talked about that a little bit last time. But let us talk about the State of the Union for the purpose of defying what I said yesterday, which is my guess is after a couple of days, outside of political ads, it won't be on many people's minds anymore. But there were some interesting moments there that illustrate a very different kind of Democratic Party today than existed even when Barack Obama would have been sitting there listening to George W. Bush. I happen to think if George W. Bush in 2007 or 2008 said, you know, if you agree with me, stand up, that we should, the fundamental first principle and fundamental obligation of America is to take care of citizens over illegal aliens. I think Barack Obama would have stood up for that in 07, 08. I think the party has changed that much. And I think it's equally telling that they couldn't stand up for war heroes. They couldn't stand up for victims of violent crime. They couldn't stand up for a little girl who survived crime inflicted by an illegal immigrant. I mean, it's just a really odd thing to be so defiant against what most people, I think, would find common normal sense.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts. I think, first and foremost, I think the president did a great job of highlighting. Frankly, he always does very well in State of the Unions because he's able to go slightly off script, but he mostly stays to talking points and did a really good job of highlighting. I thought it was genius to have the men's U.S. hockey team there. Very good rallying point for the nation. But this is the candid reality. And I think, honestly, it's best summed up by someone who responded to my Facebook post who I knew from high school who said I was a party to gamemanship and showmanship when I said that it is ridiculous that Democrats didn't stand for the line that said that we should prioritize American citizens over...
They said that was gamesmanship and showmanship.
Yeah. So I disagree with him. I told him I disagree with him. But even if you think it is, would you not call the bluff, right? If you think it's a game, it's not a game. Yeah. Illegal immigration and its victims are not a game. It's not a game for those that are trafficked across the border. It's not a game for the drugs that are put in the border. It's not a game for the communities and families that are wrecked because of it. But if you thought you're a Democrat and you think it's a game, why would you not call President Trump's bluff that's what you think, if you're progressive, and then stand for it? Because you take away the conversation. Because I think any reasonable person, if you remove politics, would say that an elected official in the United States of America prioritizes a U.S. citizen over an illegal immigrant. And you can hear it in my voice, I take exceptional offense to this as someone whose family, it took 15 years to do it the right way. Yeah. It is crazy that they cannot admit to it, that you can't stand for the parents of the woman who was senselessly stabbed in Charlotte. That's not even what is it that they're defying? You know what they're defying? It's this. They don't like that it came out of President Donald J. Trump's mouth. Yeah. They don't like that it's a Republican who's highlighting it. They don't like that it happened in a Democratic city, and they don't like that our solution to it is that we don't just let homeless people that had been previously incarcerated just sort of run around, and that we want to be the law and order party, that we want to be tough on crime. That's what they don't like, and so then they can't stand for the victims. It's unconscionable.
The other thing that I was talking with somebody about yesterday was an odd increase in the vulgarity that now seems to be much more casually thrown around. You had Congresswomen there with the F word spelled out in full.
Screaming at the president while he talked.
Screaming at the president with the F word. As I say, I can't say it because of the radio rules. I guess you can deploy it in the House of Representatives. This seems to be increasingly normal and odd to me. Odd. Just losing it. Just not in full possession of their souls.
Look, you're never going to hear it come out of my mouth that I say that a Republican can never get angry. We get angry. Human beings are angry.
Sure.
But Seth,
and I'm not pure on vulgarity. I mean, I just don't do it in public.
I need someone to tell me, honestly, there's a disproportionate anger.
Yeah.
Anger on the faces of progressive leaders and activists. And I almost never see any amount of joy. And I don't mean be happy-go-lucky, but it's just sheer anger and or depression if it manifests in that way. And, you know, I mean, we really should be praying for them because no human should be that angry. And they cannot help themselves. They are so mad at President Trump, sincerely, and at Republicans and at conservatives that they cannot think straight. And then they say, well, yeah, I'm going to be vulgar because he's vulgar.
They say these are abnormal times.
Yeah, they're abnormal times, you know, to the point where it's like, no, of course you can't say it's a good day because it's not a good day. It's horrible. Look at who's in the White House. Look at what's happening. I don't know. I don't, you know, maybe it's the types of Republicans I'm hanging out with. I just don't I don't see Republicans behaving that way.
Yeah, this is a big issue for me. It has been for a couple weeks now. This mantra that we live in abnormal times that you hear from the Democrats. What I think Donald Trump kind of did, without saying so, was showed who's the abnormal here. What is so abnormal, by the way, about these times, may I ask? Truly, what is so abnormal? If it's Donald Trump's foreign policy you don't like, it's very close to Ronald Reagan's foreign policy. Show me the differences. If you don't like his defense policy, it's very close to Ronald Reagan's defense policy. Show me the differences. Islamic terrorism, maybe an added thing that Reagan didn't have as much to deal with, but I think probably would have dealt with it the same way. If it's economic policy, Ronald Reagan tax cuts, Donald Trump tax cuts. Tariffs, okay, maybe not so much Ronald Reagan, but certainly within the tradition of Calvin Coolidge and William McKinley and big part of Republican history were tariffs. What is it? Tough on crime? What is it that is so abnormal about this presidency? I think that's a good thing to ask people when they say that it is abnormal. I think it's a good thing to ask them.
Yeah. And look, I mean, you know, the president was pointing out, for example, that the fraud, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud perpetrated by, you know, a community, the small community in Minneapolis. And Ilhan Omar was I mean, I thought she was going to be escorted out because she was screaming and shouting for, even from what you could hear on TV for a long time and much longer than what I would deem as appropriate. Right. Is she arguing that fraud was okay? Is she arguing that that fraud didn't happen? Like, what is the response?
It was enough for Tim Walz not to run for re-election.
It absolutely
of her own party.
Ended his re-election, and it's made Minneapolis and Minnesota a laughingstock. And still very inconclusive how they're going to deal with it. And so you're right, Seth, but they don't have an answer. The answer can only be, I just don't like who's saying it. I just don't like the Republican Party. Let's not pretend like it's 07 and 08. Yeah. Their responses as Democrats were exceptionally different in 07 and 08. The parties behave differently then, especially the Democratic Party, than it does in 2026, because common sense things are no longer common sense for the Democratic Party.
Clearly. And because everything that he asked people that you would have asked, that would cause someone to stand up and applaud, other than the one direct point he did ask them to stand up and applaud on, every normal American would stand up and applaud. Oh, there's a widow. Oh, there's a mother of a dead victim. Oh, there's a war hero. That's normal American stuff.
At least they stood for the hockey team. That was like the bare minimum.
Yeah. And I had a thought about that I wanted to run by you. Let me do it on the other side. George Khalaf is my guest. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Seth Leibsohn Show, coming to you from the InvestYRefi.com studios. George Khalaf is my guest, GeorgeKhalaf.com, his website, KHALAF. Follow him on social media. He's doing, especially if you're in the Carefree Cave Creek area, he's doing a coffee. You can meet up with him. I think it's around the noon hour, 1 hour?
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah, Tuesday at noon, and there's one Wednesday morning actually in DC Ranch.
Oh, okay, great.
Great. Scottsdale off the 101.
You like your coffee?
I do like coffee. It's a great spot to also a great way to meet folks, but I do love coffee. Yeah.
I love it too. I love I've been doing more tea lately. I don't know why. Hydrating. The other thing I wanted to ask you about with regard to your expertise, less as a candidate for the state house, because it probably won't have much of an implication there, but for federal elections. A lot of people I'm close with and talk to, probably you too, are very, very worried lately that there's this aura of a possible war that we don't know the dynamics of. With obviously, I'm talking about Iran. Now, I spent a little bit of the first hour talking about the merits and demerits of the debate over it. But how does that change, if it is an ongoing thing, how does that change the voting mind?
So there's a couple things. In general, when our nation typically has been engaged in a foreign conflict, there's what's called the rally around the flag, meaning the individual who was in charge, in this case President Trump, and the Republican Party would see a bump. So many old adages from the past, I don't even want to say old because some of them are like 2 years, 3 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, are no longer true. I don't know that it's completely, I'm not ready to say no, it's not going to happen. I do think it's no surprise that I think President Trump was an hour and 10 minutes into his State of the Union before he mentioned anything foreign policy. Why? Because there's a desire by the American people to focus on domestic policy issues, but it is undeniable the immense work that President Trump has done around the country, around the world, to make the world safer. The Iran thing is more complicated. So the answer is it depends. If it drags on, if it's a week, tactical, like a Maduro-style thing.
Or like last summer.
It's going to be positive if you just sort of dismantle and help the more sort of pro-democracy protesters. If it ends up being something that's dragged on and somehow America's involved long-term and it goes into the election time in November, I don't know. Honestly, the jury's out in terms of how that will play out.
It raises an interesting question amongst where we sit, which is on the right, where I don't know if there's as much debate about it as there is between the right and left on this, but there's a loud debate about it on the right. And given certain podcasters and certain people with influential reach, we have been hearing that they are driving the coalition that Trump built apart. And, for example, you hear this a lot about what Tucker Carlson has been saying lately, that if he doesn't kind of cool it a little bit with the heat of his rhetoric, that it's going to be a big problem for the wide swath that is the Trump coalition. I'm not so sure. I mean, I want Tucker to cool it for other reasons because and we can get into it. But I'm not so sure that Tucker drives that much of the coalition or what he says would out-Trump Trump.
So
certainly, you know the debate I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. So look, this is part of the reality. I think there had been a misunderstanding with the way that President Trump conducted himself and talked about foreign policy, that he was painted as someone who was zero intervention, right? That did not play out in the first administration. I think he is I would put him more in the category of intelligent intervention and not intervening in every single thing that comes our way and doing it in a way. So he's brokering peace deals and doing it in a way. I mean, like, for example, in Russia, Ukraine, there's people that support Ukraine that absolutely do not like what the president is doing. And then on the other hand, he went in and took out Nicolas Maduro, and now, essentially in one operation has, I hope, Lord willing, freed a nation, and now America's working on what that looks like. So it is more complicated. I would agree with you, Seth, and it's not a clean this side versus that side.
Right, and I think maybe we could pick up on this. I think the Trump view on this is you have to show me that it will work without question. And that has been the experience, whether it was in the first term with Soleimani or whether it was with al-Baghdadi or whether it was this term with the Iran strike and the Maduro capture. These were things that people said could not be done. And And he found out a way he figured out and took the risk of believing the people who said he could. I think that's his template. If it can be done, we'll do it. Let me pick up on that. Political consultant and pollster George Khalaf is my guest, candidate for Arizona House of Representatives, Legislative District Number 3. We're just talking about Trump and foreign and defense policy for a moment. I think you're right. You put your finger on it, that there's a misunderstanding about where Donald Trump was or ever was when it came to intervention abroad. And the first term proved it. He did several things that non-interventionists would have been counseling against. The way he took out al-Baghdadi and certainly Soleimani, I think the move of the embassy also to Jerusalem in part, the beginning of the Abraham Accords, which was something that people said couldn't be done unless you run it through, run the Middle East peace process through the streets of Gaza or Judea, Samaria, the West Bank. He got that done, and all the hand-wringers were proven wrong, as they were with the 12-day war last year, as they were about the capture and extradition of Maduro. It just seems to me that he's never been a non-interventionist, but he has not had a failure, and that the template here is I need to make absolutely sure this is not a 80-20, this is not a 90-10, this is a 100-0 proposition. Yeah. That's my sense. And if it is, by the way, my other sense, I'll compound question to you. If it is and America does succeed, boy, I think there's no question at that point what that does for the election.
100%. And he is very methodical. Look at with Iran, because his desire, and the administration's made it clear, we would prefer that you disarm, and that they're using soft power, amassing military for that reason, dispatching our great Secretary of State and others, Steve Witkoff, to take care of it. But on the other hand, he's made it clear, I am serious about this, right? And this is the thing that President Trump has. People know he's willing to do it, right? Like, do it as in, like, go full bore, like execute on the threat. Yeah. We remember.
And he's put a tremendous force of threat out there.
We remember. I remember, as someone who was very much following this. Do you remember President Obama's red line that he gave?
I very much remember it. You bet.
And absolutely, Bashar al-Assad not just walked over the red line, trampled on the red line, and nothing occurred. And so that is the beauty of Trump foreign policy and the legacy that we are going to be learning about in 100 years in the way that we learn about Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy, right? We are going to be learning about this because it has redefined Americanism, or the speech that Secretary Rubio gave at the conference earlier this month. Power and, yes, flexing of American ideals in Christendom and Christianity, but doing it in the right way. But there is a lens that the American citizen in the interest of America should be prioritized. But again, what should you expect from the President of the United States and his administration? Would it not be expected that the leader of a nation would put his nation and the people of his nation as a priority? Like, tell me, like, who can disagree with that?
The red line thing is instructive. This is when Barack Obama gave a speech that was it Bashar al-Assad? If Bashar al-Assad were to use chemical weapons, he would be crossing a red line that he would regret. As you said, Assad did cross that line and then some, and turned Syria into a charnel house. And then Barack Obama just kind of threw up his hands and gave it to the Russians. That's what Barack Obama actually did, which isn't, to me, the story. The story is that Syria thought they could do it and get away with it, that they took the measure of Barack Obama and said, we can cross the red line. That's the story.
Same thing that we said about Vladimir Putin,
right.
That
he did it with Biden, not
under
Trump.
Biden,
right.
Because he knew that he could get away with it.
Right.
But it is very different with President Trump because he's willing. Look, he was willing to go in, and Nicolas Maduro, thought he called "quote unquote" his bluff, and we know what happened. So it is important. That is part of his power, right? The Teddy Roosevelt's line, "Speak softly but carry a big stick." Yeah. It's done in a very
he speaks loudly and carries a big stick.
Yeah, in a very Trumpian and a very
that's why it's the
way.
Trump. The Trump corollary. Right.
But it's important to note, and again, we want peace in the world. Yeah. We can't do it all as a nation. Yeah. But there is a way to do it methodically, and I appreciate the way that he is doing it methodically today. And we'll see how all these things play out. We also have to be very. Look, in the information age, things move so quickly on social media. Everyone's jumping to all kinds of conclusions. We got to take it a step at a time.
big steps at a time. That was another interesting point from the State of the Union when he spoke of the wars he had helped negotiate settlement of, including, I'll admit, wars I didn't know were existing.
Exactly.
And they laughed. They laughed at him. They laughed at him.
Of course.
And when you say we all want peace, okay, I do believe we all want peace, but you laugh at that? You laugh at the solving of wars? You laugh at the quelling of violence? I think it's worth saying, again, compound question throwing to you on that point, I think it's worth saying that when people say war or a liberation action is not the answer, sometimes doing nothing or negotiations are not the answer. Iran, for example, has been at war with us for 47 years. I detailed it earlier. And our response has been to negotiate. Has that worked? Clearly it has not worked. You look at the decimation and genocide of Christians in Africa. What would be more peaceful? Taking out the militias that are doing that or letting this continue? It seems to me it would cause more peace if we took out the militias that are leading the carnage.
Yeah.
Seems to me.
Yeah. It's a. I mean,
if the case can be made that way.
Yeah, there's so much. There's so much here, Seth. And look, America has long been a leader in the world, but for a long time, the world has taken advantage of us. And I don't think. Actually, I'll say it this way. I'll say it in the positive. I believe that the speech of Secretary Rubio and the vision that he cast for it, not is just a very appropriate vision, but it is a vision that truly centers and uses the beauty of what America can provide, but says it in a way that does not let Western Europe, someone who, frankly, up until very recently, and now we have leaders, thank God, like Giorgio Meloni and others that are actually fighting for the ideals that would align with what we believe is the West versus absolutely allowing the West to be decimated. And they were taking, I mean, again, tell me objectively, can someone say truly that they were not taking advantage of America and our budgets and our funding of NATO,
of course,
and then just being unwilling to spend percentages of GDP?
We had created a welfare state abroad. There's no question about that. And it is important, though, I think, to say, it's my historical sense, I think I'm right, that where more peace has been brought into the world, where it has been brought through force or action, it's been brought by force or action of America. And that's something to remember, I think. And it's going to be interesting to see where some of the Democratic Party comes down on whether we do engage in further action, whether it's to liberate Cubans, whether it's to put a surcease to the genocide in Africa, or whether it's to liberate the Iranian people from their terror masters. It seems to me that once upon a time, not too long ago, most people would have not made a partisan hack of this and have prognosticated the worst case scenarios. America can do things. Everything is not Iraq and Afghanistan. We have had a lot of military successes even since then.
Of course.
We'll put a bow on it when we come right back. George Khalaf is my guest, Khalaf, candidate for State House of Representatives, LD3, Legislative District 3. Check him out at georgekhalaf.com. I want to thank George Khalaf, who has been my guest this hour, although it started with an off-air criticism of me. As many listeners know, the studio, for reasons incomprehensible, is so cold you could hang meat and keep it in here forever. So I have a space heater. It's now become a big space heater. And you made fun of my manhood.
I effectively have a tan on half of my face, where the space heater has been incubating me, as I said. So I do feel slightly cooked.
I tilted it more my way.
Thank you.
George, I have been imploring our movement to examine and exploit more social issues that I think have not been top of mind, or at least not top of mind in political legislative circles. You and I spend a great deal of time working on youth issues and protecting our kids. I have to tell you, I want to temper some of some of my criticism of people not taking up these issues more seriously. Our state legislature, our Republican caucus, has been doing a very good job.
Yes.
Nick Cupper has been doing a very good job protecting kids online, protecting them from exploitation. This is a big issue for you and your candidacy too, isn't it?
It's a huge issue, and for me, because it connects to the future, it connects to our kids. Of course, as folks know, Brianna and I, we have 3 boys that range in age from 10 to 4 months. Lord willing, we want to have more children. And I am fully aware, as a dad, as a citizen, as a human, as the next state representative from District 3, that there's a lot of seriousness and a lot of issues in this world, a lot of very serious things to tackle. Mm-hmm. And yet I am also very aware that there is a lot of good and there's a lot of upside, and that we should, and have begun to more, use stories of difficulty to paint a picture of what should be in the future. Right. Our children are a line that will not be crossed. Our children will be defended. The Republicans in the House and Senate, we are acting. Our governor is acting against us. We will use this in the campaign to highlight the fact that if you believe children should be protected, there is only one choice and one party, and I pledge to not just be a good vote. I will be a leader at the state capitol in this, because the future is too important, and this campaign has absolutely reinvigorated my understanding and belief that voters feel the same way, that amidst the difficulty, they can see what we can be. They can see what America once was and what it can be and will be in the future if we fight for it. And Arizona is in that same boat.
Great. You will be a great ally to that. You measure a country or a community by any number of ledgers, economic. I think you also measure it by how many kids are crying themselves to sleep at night, how many kids are being exploited by pornography, trafficking, or abuse, and you stand foursquare to make sure none are. Thank you, George Khalaf. On behalf of George and Mr. Bill and David and Miss Teresa, until tomorrow, I'm Seth Leibsohn. God bless, and class dismissed.